Telesto! This is the weapon, which is turning out to be one of the most troublesome weapons in D2, and not necessarily in terms of its raw power, but of course more in terms of its ability to break things in the game. At the moment, in Season of Dawn, there are a series of different bugs. We've got things like infinite ammo, the capacity to trigger kill abilities like Roaring Flames on the Titan, and a couple of other either broken or just bizarre bugs. And so we'll talk about those, and then going back a little bit, Telesto of course has caused trouble by generating super energy out of thin air, completing activities for us, and more. So I figured today we'd take a look at what's going on with the Besto right now, and its interesting place in the game. I know it's a little bit of a different video, but could be a little bit of fun nonetheless. Initially, let's talk about some of the weird stuff that Telesto is doing at the moment. A few days back, we did speak about some new exotic builds in the game, and Telesto definitely featured fairly prominently into one of them. Of course, currently, Telesto does have an infinite ammo glitch, so there is a new mod this season called Heavy Handed, and the secondary perk on the mod states that while a player is surrounded by multiple enemies, that defeating an enemy with a fusion rifle, shotgun, sidearm, or submachine gun will add ammo for that weapon to a player's reserves. The Heavy Handed mod does come from the Tangled Shore obelisk, and it's worth pointing out that this does require 7 energy, and to activate the secondary part of the bonus, you also have to have a second arc mod equipped on that piece of armor. And so essentially with Telesto, if you fire a series of rounds at the floor using the weapon, and if you're also near to a couple of enemies, when the projectiles detonate, they're actually going to produce excessive amounts of special ammo for fusion rifles and shotguns. And so you can see in the clip right here, a bunch of Telesto rounds on the ground were completely out of special ammo, and when they detonate with this mod active, and of course we're also close to a series of enemies, which is actually allowing that mod to offer the ammo benefit, and basically all of those projectiles that detonate themselves count as kills and generate ammo. And so if you're using Telesto, it's a really efficient way to keep ammo coming, but also even if you're rocking different special weapons, once you're down to just a couple of rounds, you can actually switch to Telesto, fire projectiles onto the ground, change weapon real quick, and then enjoy a bunch of ammo for your other special weapons. Obviously, you can very consciously use the glitch, but if you're using Telesto inside of a build, so the other day we spoke about a new build for Warlocks, and if you are looking for some cool builds that you can set up with Dawn mods or new artifact mods, then definitely check that video out. But nonetheless, while the mod is on and the weapon is on, you end up generating a ton of special ammo passively through your gameplay anyway. So you can think about it in 2 different ways, but safe to say, especially when it comes to switching weapons to get ammo for a specific type of weapon, in this respect with the heavy-handed mod, Telesto kind of becomes a mini rally flag that you carry around with you for special ammo. On top of this, at the moment, there are a couple of different ability glitches which are affected by Telesto. So first up, for the throwing hammer, I did actually see this one via Cheese Forever, who uploaded a video about it, as well as a bunch of other glitches and bugs this season, as always. And so basically, if you have Telesto equipped and Middle Tree Sunbreaker, if you allow your melee hammer or your grenade to explode on top of projectiles, it'll actually give you 3 stacks of Roaring Flames. Obviously, those stacks are being generated by separate projectiles on the Telesto, but basically what it means is that you can fire Telesto rounds on the ground, throw a grenade on top of them, trigger Roaring Flames, and then when you throw your throwing hammer, you're going to have quite a big damage bump to start your first melee. Of course, if you're rocking a build like the Wormgod build we also spoke about the other day, that gives you a really good head start on DPS. But then there's also the element inside of PvP, where it actually allows players to immediately trigger enough damage, if you combine that with Solar Plexus, to then one-shot players with that hammer because of that Roaring Flame stack that they're getting from Telesto. Of course, in terms of actual gameplay, you could have just used your Solar Super and have 3 stacks of Roaring Flames and then throw a hammer and start a chain of one-shots on multiple different enemies. And so you can neutrally earn that in gameplay relatively easily, but it is still pretty strong considering you can make it happen at any time as long as you have the build. One that Cheese Forever also mentioned is the ability to use Knife Trick on Telesto, so you can basically do the same thing we're doing with the hammer, but you put the projectiles down, use Knife Trick, and it's going to give you playing with fire immediately. And so from these glitches, as well as some of the glitches we've seen in the past with the weapon, it appears that one of the issues is that projectiles basically behave like enemies. Going back in time, we had the glitch in the Blind Well, where projectiles that were detonating were actually counting as kills. And so of course there was that glitch where you could just fire a bunch of projectiles and fly through rounds inside a Blind Well. But then there was also the Super Glitch, and of course that one happened last season, and it resulted in Telesto actually being banned for a little while, or should I say disabled. And basically if you had the Enhanced Ashes to Assets perk, you could destroy Telesto charges to instantly charge your super back up. So that behavior definitely appears to be causing quite a few issues in the game at the moment for the weapon. There are a couple of other interesting things going on right now though, and one would be with Ward of Dawn. So I'm not sure if this is actually intentional behavior or whether it's completely bugged, but if you pop a Ward of Dawn, or indeed if you approach a friendly Ward of Dawn, if you fire Telesto rounds at it, instead of attaching to the outside, they'll actually all appear bang in the middle of where the Ward of Dawn is placed. And so right here we're messing around with it in Tribute Hall. I drop a bubble over the ogre's head, and you can see when I'm firing rounds at the bubble, they're detonating bang in the middle of the bubble where the ogre is, and doing damage. And so you can play around with this inside of PvP as well. If you had a bunch of Telesto rounds, you could drop a bubble on a zone or whatever, and using the bubble as cover, you could put those projectiles all over it, then jump back in to kind of bait enemies in, and they're going to literally just get nuked by Telesto. This is definitely pretty bizarre. There are other examples which are definitely related to projectiles behaving in some way like combatants. And you can see that with things like Telesto giving you health back on a middle tree sentinel when a grenade detonates over it. And so that's kind of the bulk of what I wanted to talk about initially. Obviously we do have the infinite ammo glitch, which inside of PvE right now absolutely is worth using, and there are some pretty fun builds. I'm not sure how long it's going to take for Bungie to adjust that. I believe their next hotfix will be fairly early on in January, but of course the Roaring Flames thing is pretty interesting in the Crucible. And then once again, historically, Telesto gave us that capacity to clear the blind well at ridiculous rates. The glitch with ashes to assets and being able to farm supers back really quickly by destroying projectiles with grenades. And also, some of you guys may remember that a while back, folks were actually crashing other people's game by firing a ridiculous amount of projectiles onto them. I think it was causing some kind of memory issue that basically would just cause the game to crash. So Telesto is a really interesting weapon in that respect, and I'm curious to see if Bungie are going to try and adjust its behavior. It's becoming a bit of a meme, and folks do regularly say Telesto 100% will not be coming into Destiny 3. And it's also interesting because looking back in time, you had weapons like Pocket Infinity that had various different bugs and glitches that would happen with the rate of fire, the automatic firing, and Bungie pretty much could never really get that weapon to work inside of Destiny 1, as in they couldn't fix all of the bugs that were present there. And I believe even with weapons like Wardcliff Coil in D2, of course that was data mined as Dubious Volley inside of Destiny 1 but never actually made it into the game. I may be mistaken, but I believe developers mentioned some kind of technical limitation or issue with the weapon, although it could have definitely been a decision on the basis that it maybe was too similar to Galahorn or something at the time, but curious nonetheless. So for today guys, that's what I wanted to speak about. How do you feel about Telesto? How do you feel about some of the bugs in the game? Of course, infinite ammo, most players aren't really going to complain about. Some of the stuff that's a little bit nastier inside of PvP will of course trigger more opinion than that, so let us know any thoughts you have about the weapon down below, what Bungie may do to fix it. I don't know if they would disable the weapon in its current state. I mean, they haven't decided to do that yet, but I'm definitely curious to see whether they're going to take the weapon back to the workbench and if there's anything they could do to stop these issues which seem to come up fairly often. Give me your thoughts about it down below, but if you've enjoyed this interesting look at Telesto, a rating below really helps me out. But if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit subscribe if you want me to keep you up to date with everything related to Destiny 2. But otherwise, I hope you guys have an awesome day.